The handcuffs clicked shut, echoing louder than the sirens wailing in the humid Georgia air. Deputy Rylan Hale thought he had just caught a career criminal, a black man driving a luxury SUV through Oak Haven County with a smart mouth. He did not know that the man in his back seat was not a drug dealer. He was Lieutenant General Marcus Hale, a 3-star general who oversaw logistics for half the eastern seaboard. Rylan Hale smirked as he tossed the general's phone onto the dashboard, unaware that a single missed protocol was about to trigger a call to the Pentagon that would dismantle his entire department. Karma was not coming. It was already here. The mid-July heat in Oak Haven County, Georgia, was a physical weight pressing down on the asphalt until it shimmered in a mirage of oil and humidity. It was the kind of heat that made tempers short and patience shorter. For Lieutenant General Marcus Hale, however, the heat was nothing. He had endured the scorching sands of Kuwait, the humid jungles of the Pacific during joint training exercises, and the stifling pressure of the Pentagon briefing rooms. This casual drive in his civilian silver Mercedes G-Wagon along Route 27 was supposed to be his decompression. Marcus was a man of precise habits. At 58, his hair was graying at the temples, cropped close in a high and tight that had not changed since he was a cadet at West Point. He wore a crisp, navy blue polo shirt and khaki slacks. There were no medals on his chest today, no stars on his shoulders, just the quiet confidence of a man who commanded 40,000 troops and managed a budget larger than the GDP of some small nations. He was on his way to Fort Benning to surprise his son, Elias, who was graduating from airborne school the next morning. He checked his speedometer. 54 in a 55 zone. Marcus did not break laws. He enforced them. A few miles back, sitting in the shadow of a sprawling oak tree near the old Millers Creek Bridge, Deputy Sheriff Rylan Hale sat in his cruiser, sweating through his uniform. Rylan was 32, with a face that looked like it had been clenched in a permanent scowl since high school. He was the kind of cop locals warned out-of-towners about, the kind who saw the badge not as a shield but as a hunting license. Rylan was bored. The quota for the month was low, and Sheriff Vance Briggs had been writing him about ticket revenues. He took a sip of lukewarm Mountain Dew and squinted at the radar gun. Then the silver G-Wagon glided past. Rylan sat up straight. A car like that did not belong here, not in Oak Haven. That was a 6-figure vehicle, and as it passed, Rylan caught a glimpse of the driver. Well, Rylan muttered to himself, dropping the car into gear. What do we have here? He did not see a decorated military officer. He did not see a father proud of his son. He saw a black man in a car that cost more than Rylan would make in 3 years. In Rylan's narrow, prejudiced worldview, that equation only had one solution: narcotics. He peeled out onto the highway, gravel spraying behind his tires. He did not turn his lights on immediately. He wanted to tail him. He wanted to see the driver sweat. He pulled up close to the Mercedes bumper, dangerously close, aggressively filling the rearview mirror with the grill of his Dodge Charger. Inside the Mercedes, Marcus glanced at the mirror. He saw the aggressive posture of the cruiser. His combat instincts, honed over 3 decades of service, did not flare with fear but with tactical awareness. Tailgating intimidation tactic, he thought calmly. Maintain speed. Maintain lane position. Marcus tapped the brakes gently, just enough to light the lamps, signaling the officer to back off. That was all Rylan needed. Brake checking an officer. Rylan grinned. Flipping the switch, the red and blue lights exploded into life, piercing the late afternoon haze. The siren chirped once, a sound of authority demanding submission. Marcus sighed, a long, weary exhalation. He signaled right, slowed down gradually, and pulled onto the narrow gravel shoulder, ensuring he was far enough off the road for safety. He put the car in park, rolled down all 4 windows, a standard procedure to put an officer at ease, and placed his large hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. He waited. He watched in the side mirror as Deputy Rylan Hale exited the cruiser. The deputy did not walk. He swaggered. His hand was already hovering near his holster, the thumb brake undone. He was not approaching a traffic stop. He was approaching a raid. Rylan did not come to the window immediately. He stopped at the rear tail light, touching it with his thumb, an old superstition to leave a fingerprint, and then leaned down, peering into the back seat through the tinted glass. He walked slowly, trying to unsettle the driver. When Rylan finally reached the window, he did not say hello. He did not ask for license and registration. "Whose car is this, boy?" Rylan asked, his voice dripping with a faux, casual southern drawl that barely masked the venom underneath. Marcus turned his head slowly. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and utterly unimpressed. He had been addressed by senators, warlords, and presidents. A deputy sheriff with a dip of tobacco in his lip was not going to rattle him. "This vehicle belongs to me, officer," Marcus said, his voice a deep baritone, calm and level. "Is there a reason for the stop?" "I asked you a question," Rylan snapped, leaning closer, his hand resting on the doorframe. "And the way I see it, a car like this, it don't fit the profile. You got any receipts for this ride?" "The registration is in the glove box. My identification is in my pocket. I am reaching for it now," Marcus stated, telegraphing his movements. "Don't you move!" Rylan barked, his hand dropping to his gun. "I didn't tell you to move." Marcus froze. He recognized the tone. It was the tone of a man who had lost control of the situation because he never had control of himself. This was dangerous. "Officer," Marcus said, "I am a Lieutenant General in the United States Army. I am reaching for my military ID. I suggest you lower your voice and state the infraction." Rylan laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound. "A general? You look more like a runner for the Atlanta boys. Get out of the car." "I am not getting out of the vehicle for a traffic violation," Marcus said firmly. "That is not standard procedure." "I decide what the procedure is," Rylan shouted. He ripped the door open. "Get out now." Marcus looked at the deputy. He saw the sweat on Rylan's upper lip, the dilated pupils, the vein throbbing in his neck. He knew that any sudden movement would give this man the excuse he was desperate for. Slowly, Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt. He stepped out of the air-conditioned sanctuary of the Mercedes into the stifling heat. He stood a full head taller than Deputy Rylan Hale. Marcus was 6'3", built like a linebacker who had kept his form. Rylan had to look up, and that only made him angrier. "Turn around, hands on the hood," Rylan commanded. "Am I under arrest?" Marcus asked. "You're being detained for suspicion of grand theft auto and resisting a lawful order," Rylan spat. "Now turn around before I make you turn around." Marcus turned. He placed his hands on the hot metal of his own car. He felt the rough hands of the deputy patting him down harder than necessary, checking his pockets, slapping his inner thighs. Rylan pulled out Marcus's wallet. He did not look at the ID inside. He just threw it on the hood. "You got drugs in the car?" Rylan asked, moving to rummage in the driver's door. "I do not consent to a search," Marcus said over his shoulder. Rylan paused. He looked back at Marcus with a look of pure malice. "I smell marijuana," Rylan lied smoothly. "That gives me probable cause. Stand there and shut up." Marcus closed his eyes for a brief second. He thought of the phone in his pocket. He needed to make a call, but before he could move, he felt the cold steel of handcuffs slap onto his right wrist. "You're twitchy," Rylan said, wrenching Marcus's arm behind his back. "I don't like twitchy." The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut sent a shockwave through Marcus's system. It was a violation of dignity that burned hotter than the Georgia sun. He was a man who had sworn an oath to the Constitution, a man who had led battalions into the jaws of death, and here he was being shackled like a common criminal by a man who likely could not pass the Army's basic aptitude test. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly quiet. "You are making a mistake, a very expensive mistake. I advise you to look at the identification you just threw on the hood." "I don't need to look at fake IDs," Rylan grunted, shoving Marcus toward the cruiser. "You can tell your story to the judge on Monday. Until then, you're a guest of the county." "Monday?" Marcus stiffened, planting his feet. "This is Friday afternoon. You intend to hold me without charge for the weekend?" "Resisting arrest is a charge," Rylan said, shoving Marcus again. Marcus did not stumble, but he allowed himself to be moved. Fighting physically would be a death sentence. He knew the statistics. He knew how this story ended if he resisted. He had to fight this with the weight of the institution he served. Rylan opened the back door of the Charger and pushed Marcus's head down roughly. Too roughly. Marcus's temple grazed the doorframe, a sharp sting of pain. "Watch the head," Marcus snapped. "Watch your mouth," Rylan retorted, slamming the door shut. The back of the cruiser smelled of stale vomit and industrial disinfectant. The partition was a cage of wire mesh. Marcus sat awkwardly, his hands numb behind his back. He watched through the window as Rylan walked back to the Mercedes. The deputy did not just search the car, he ransacked it. Marcus watched with a simmering rage as Rylan tossed his duffel bag onto the asphalt. His dress uniform, carefully packed in a garment bag for the graduation ceremony, was thrown onto the dusty shoulder. Rylan opened the glove box, scattering papers. He was looking for a gun or a brick of cocaine, anything to justify the stop. Finding nothing in the front, Rylan moved to the trunk. He pulled out a locked hard case. "Open the trunk!" Rylan yelled through the glass, realizing he could not hear Marcus. He stomped back to the cruiser and opened the driver's door, leaning in. What's in the case? Guns? That is government property, Marcus said. It contains classified logistical data on an encrypted drive. You do not have the clearance to touch it, let alone open it. Rylan's eyes lit up. Classified, huh? Sounds like trafficking to me. If you attempt to force that case open, Marcus said, locking eyes with the deputy in the rearview mirror, you will be violating the National Security Act. Do not touch it. Rylan sneered. I'm the law here, General. I can touch whatever I want. Rylan went back to the Mercedes. He took his baton and smashed the lock on the hard case. Marcus flinched, not out of fear, but out of disbelief. The case contained sensitive troop movement schedules for the eastern seaboard. It was encrypted, yes, but the physical tampering was a federal felony. Rylan pulled out a laptop and a stack of files stamped top secret. He flipped through them, clearly not understanding a word of the logistics jargon, then tossed them onto the passenger seat of his cruiser like they were old newspapers. Then Rylan found the phone. Marcus's personal cell phone was in the center console. Rylan picked it up. Let's see who you're calling, Rylan muttered. He saw the background photo, Marcus shaking hands with the President of the United States. For a second, Rylan paused. The photo looked real. The President looked familiar. But cognitive dissonance is a powerful drug. Rylan convinced himself it was Photoshop. These guys fake everything, he thought. Fake IDs, fake photos, fake lives. He walked back to the cruiser, tossing the phone onto his dashboard, just out of Marcus's reach. You have one phone call when we get to the station, Rylan said, putting the car in gear. If the phones are working. I need my phone now, Marcus said. I am required to report my status to my command. You're not in command of nothing right now, Rylan said, peeling out onto the road. He left the Mercedes on the side of the road, doors wide open, trunk gaping, hazards off. You're leaving my vehicle unsecured, Marcus demanded. There is sensitive government property in there. Tow truck's coming, Rylan said dismissively. If it's still there when they get there. As the cruiser sped toward the county jail, Marcus closed his eyes and began to breathe rhythmically. Box breathing. 4 seconds in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. He needed to lower his heart rate. He needed to think. He was in a dead zone. The local sheriff, a man named Vance Briggs, ran this county like a thief. Marcus knew the type. If he went into that jail, he would be processed, stripped, and thrown in a cell. He would miss his son's graduation. But worse, the data on his laptop was now compromised by a chain of custody violation. He looked at the dashboard. His phone was sliding around as Rylan took the curves too fast. It was not locked. Deputy Hale, Marcus said, I want you to listen to me very carefully. My name is Lieutenant General Marcus Hale. I report directly to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. If you bring me to that jail, you will trigger a series of events that you cannot stop. I am giving you one chance to pull over, check my ID properly, and let us resolve this. Rylan laughed. You guys always have a story. I know the mayor. I know the judge. You know the Joint Chiefs? Marcus said. Sure, and I'm having dinner with Elvis tonight. This is your last warning, Marcus said. Rylan turned up the radio. Country music blasted, drowning out the general's voice. 20 minutes later, they arrived at the Oak Haven County Sheriff's Department. It was a squat brick building with barred windows. Rylan dragged Marcus out of the car, parading him past 2 other deputies who were smoking outside. Look what I caught, Rylan bragged. Says he's a general driving a G-Wagon, probably stole it from a rapper in Atlanta. The other deputies laughed. A general? Did he salute you, Rylan? He's going to learn to salute, Rylan said, shoving Marcus through the heavy steel doors. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of stale coffee. The booking sergeant, an older woman named Mabel with tired eyes, looked up. She saw Marcus, dignified, standing tall despite the handcuffs, his eyes scanning the room with tactical precision. She saw the quality of his clothes. She saw the way he held himself. And she saw something Rylan did not. The West Point ring on Marcus's finger. Rylan, Mabel said, her voice hesitant. What do you have here? Grand theft, resisting suspicion of trafficking, Rylan rattled off. Book him. Name? Mabel asked Marcus. Lieutenant General Marcus Hale, Marcus said clearly. Service number 04492 Bravo. I am demanding my right to contact the Department of Defense immediately. Mabel typed the name into the computer. Her eyes went wide. The screen flashed a red banner. DODVIP, Level 5 clearance. Do not detain. Rylan, Mabel whispered, her face draining of color. Come look at this. I don't need to look at it. Just print the mugshot, Rylan said, unhooking his belt. Rylan, Mabel hissed. The computer says he's real. It says he's, oh my God. Rylan frowned. He walked around the desk and looked at the screen. He saw the file photo. It was the man standing in front of him, but in a dress uniform with 3 stars on each shoulder and a chest full of ribbons. Rylan's stomach dropped, but his pride was a heavy anchor. "Computer glitch," Rylan muttered. "Hackers. They can hack anything these days." "I want my phone," Marcus said. "Now." Rylan looked at Marcus. He looked at the computer. He had 2 choices: apologize and pray for mercy, or double down and hope he could find something, anything, to make the charges stick. Rylan doubled down. "Put him in the holding cell," Rylan ordered. "I'm going to search that laptop. If he's a general, why does he have encrypted files he don't want me to see?" "Rylan, you can't touch that laptop," Mabel cried. "Watch me." Rylan grabbed the laptop bag he'd brought in and stormed off toward the back office. Marcus turned to Mabel. "Ma'am," Marcus said, "you seem like a sensible woman. Give me a phone. If he breaks the encryption on that hard drive, federal agents will be here within the hour and they won't be knocking." Mabel looked at the angry deputy disappearing down the hall, then at the general. She reached under the desk, pulled out the desk phone, and slid it across the counter. "Make it quick," she whispered. Marcus picked up the receiver. He did not dial 911. He did not dial a lawyer. He dialed a number that bypassed the switchboards. A number that rang on a desk in a 5-sided building in Arlington, Virginia. Pentagon Command Center. A crisp voice answered. "Major Vance speaking?" "Major," Marcus said, his voice calm but cold as ice. "This is Lieutenant General Hale, Code Black. I am being illegally detained by local law enforcement in Oak Haven County, Georgia. Secure materials are compromised. I need you to patch me through to General Hayes' office and get the JAG Corps on the line. We have a situation." "Yes, General. Tracing your location now. Stand by." Marcus looked at the camera in the corner of the booking room. Karma, he thought, is about to arrive in a Black Hawk helicopter. 400 miles away in the sub-basement of the Pentagon, the atmosphere in the National Military Command Center shifted from routine monitoring to crisis mode in the span of 3 seconds. Major Vance, a sharp-eyed officer who monitored domestic logistics for high-ranking personnel, stared at his screen. The blinking red light was not an error. It was a beacon. "I have a code black," Vance announced, his voice cutting through the hum of servers and quiet conversations. "Lieutenant General Hale's beacon has been triggered. Location, Oak Haven County Sheriff's Department, Georgia. Status, detained." The room went silent. General Hale was not just a logistics officer. He was one of the architects of the current Eastern Defense Strategy. He carried clearance levels that exceeded those of most senators. His laptop contained the keys to the kingdom regarding the movement of nuclear-capable assets along the Atlantic coast. "Detained?" Colonel Vance, Major Vance's superior, strode over, his coffee forgotten. "By whom? FBI? Homeland?" "Negative, sir," Vance typed furiously. "Local law enforcement, Oak Haven Sheriff's Department. And sir, the transponder on his secure laptop just registered a tamper event. Someone is trying to brute force the casing." Colonel Vance's face went pale, then red. "Get General Hayes on the line, get the JAG Corps, and get me the commander of the military police at Fort Benning. That's only 40 miles from Oak Haven. Tell them we have a hostage situation involving a high-value asset." "Hostage situation, sir?" "If a local yokel is hacking a top-secret drive," Colonel Vance growled, "that is an act of compromising national security. Deploy the quick reaction force." Back in Oak Haven, the air conditioning in the station was rattling, but it did nothing to cool the rising temperature in the room. Sheriff Vance Briggs walked through the front door, shaking rain from his hat. A thunderstorm was rolling in, darkening the Georgia sky. Briggs was a massive man, 60 years old, with a history of heart problems and a desire to retire quietly. He ran his county with a mix of corruption and laziness, but he knew where the lines were. He saw the silver Mercedes G-Wagon parked half-hazardously in the impound lot outside, doors still open, rain beginning to soak the expensive leather. He frowned. Inside, he saw Mabel, the booking sergeant, pale and trembling behind the glass. He saw Deputy Rylan Hale sitting at his desk with a screwdriver and a hammer, trying to pry open a black reinforced hard case. And he saw the man in the holding cell. Briggs stopped. He knew people. He knew authority. And the man sitting on the metal bench in the cell, staring at the wall with meditative calmness, radiated more authority than anyone Briggs had ever met. "Rylan," Briggs said, his voice a low rumble, "what are you doing with that screwdriver?" "Boss," Rylan looked up, grinning. "Caught a big one. Drug runner driving that fancy wagon outside. Fake ID says he's a general. I'm just trying to get into his stash box, probably full of cash or product." Briggs walked over to the desk. He picked up the ID Rylan had tossed aside. He looked at the hologram. He felt the weight of the card. He looked at the name, Lieutenant General Marcus Hale. Briggs's heart skipped a beat. He looked at the laptop case Rylan was scratching up. It had a sticker on the bottom, property of U.S. government. Penalty for unauthorized use, 20 years imprisonment. Rylan, Briggs said, his voice trembling slightly. Did you run him? Mabel did. Computer glitched, said he was a VIP. Rylan scoffed. Computer's wrong. Briggs looked at Mabel. She shook her head frantically, mouthing the word real. Briggs walked slowly to the holding cell. He grabbed the bars. Excuse me, Briggs said. Marcus turned his head slowly. Sheriff, I assume you are the ranking officer here. I am, Briggs said. Vance Briggs. There seems to be a misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, Marcus said. Your deputy arrested me without cause, assaulted me, denied me legal counsel, and is currently committing a federal felony by attempting to breach classified government property. I made a phone call 5 minutes ago. If I were you, I would open this door. He's lying, Rylan shouted from the desk. Don't let him out. He's a con artist. Briggs looked at Marcus. He saw the West Point ring. He saw the posture. Rylan, Briggs barked. Unlock him. What? Rylan asked. Unlock him now, Briggs screamed, his face turning purple. And give him his damn computer. Deputy Rylan moved with sullen slowness, confused and angry. He did not understand why everyone was panicking. So the guy had friends. So what? He was still a suspect in Rylan's eyes. Rylan grabbed the keys and walked to the cell. He jammed the key into the lock and twisted it. You're lucky, boy, Rylan sneered as the door swung open. Sheriff's got no spine, but I'm watching you. Marcus stood up. He adjusted his polo shirt. He stepped out of the cell, towering over Rylan. He did not say a word to the deputy. He walked straight to Sheriff Briggs. My property, Marcus said. Briggs scrambled to the desk. He grabbed the laptop, the wallet, and the phone. He handed them to Marcus with shaking hands. General, Briggs stammered. I apologize. Deputy Hale is young. He's overzealous. We can drop all charges. You can go. No harm done, right? Marcus checked the laptop case. The lock was mangled. The plastic casing scratched deep. He looked at the phone. He looked at Briggs. No harm done, Marcus repeated. Sheriff, the harm is that a secured device containing national defense protocols has been tampered with by an unsecured civilian. That is a breach. The harm is that a United States general officer was kidnapped. Kidnapped? Rylan scoffed. Arrested? Unlawful detention is kidnapping, Marcus said, and the United States Army does not negotiate with kidnappers. Marcus looked at his watch. They should be here. Who? Briggs asked, sweat pouring down his face. The answer came not in words but in sound. It started as a low thrumming, vibrating the coffee mugs on the desks. Then it grew, a rhythmic whump-whump that shook the window panes in their frames. It was not one helicopter. It was a formation. Then came the roar of engines on the road. What is that? Mabel whispered. Marcus walked to the front window and looked out through the blinds. That, ma'am, is the 75th Ranger Regiment and the military police from Fort Benning. Outside, the scene was apocalyptic for a small-town sheriff's department. 2 Black Hawk helicopters swooped low over the power lines, the wash from their rotors kicking up a blinding cloud of dust and rain. They hovered aggressively over the parking lot. Snipers clearly visible in the side doors, their rifles trained on the sheriff's building. Simultaneously, 3 Humvees and a black tactical SUV screeched into the parking lot, blocking the exit. Heavily armed soldiers in full tactical gear poured out of the vehicles. They did not move like hops. They moved like predators, precise, fast, terrifying. Oh my God, Rylan whispered, his arrogance finally shattering. The front door of the station did not open. It was kicked open. 6 soldiers stormed in, rifles raised, tactical lights sweeping the room. Hands! The lead soldier screamed. Show me your hands now, now, now! Sheriff Briggs threw his hands in the air so fast he nearly dislocated a shoulder. Mabel dove under her desk. Deputy Rylan, stunned, reached instinctively for his belt, not to draw, but out of nervous habit. Don't do it! A soldier roared. 2 red laser dots appeared instantly on Rylan's chest. I'm a cop! Rylan screamed, freezing. You are a threat! The soldier yelled. Get on the ground! Face down! Hands behind your head! A tall, broad-shouldered colonel in fatigues walked in behind the soldiers. He scanned the room, ignoring the terrified local police. His eyes landed on Marcus. The colonel snapped to attention and saluted. General Hale, Colonel Vance, 3rd MP Brigade. Are you injured, sir? Marcus returned the salute slowly. I am unharmed, Colonel, but we have a significant situation regarding the security of my equipment. Marcus pointed a finger at Rylan Hale, who was now being zip-tied by 2 soldiers on the linoleum floor. That man, Marcus said, his voice ringing with finality, attempted to access the encrypted drive after being warned of its classification. He also assaulted a superior officer. Colonel Vance turned to Rylan. The look on the colonel's face was one of pure disgust. Sheriff, Colonel Vance said to Briggs, who was shaking against the wall, I'm taking jurisdiction of this scene under the National Security Act. Your deputy isn't going to county jail. He's coming with us. With you? Briggs squeaked. To where? Federal custody, Vance said. Leavenworth has a holding cell for domestic terrorists and those who compromise national security. We'll sort it out there. Rylan began to thrash. You can't do this. I'm a deputy. Briggs, tell them this is my jurisdiction. Marcus walked over to Rylan. He crouched down, bringing his face close to the deputy's ear. You asked for a receipt for my car, Marcus whispered. You asked who I knew. Well, deputy, I know the people who write the laws you pretended to enforce, and you're about to learn that the badge on your chest is just a piece of tin compared to the oath I swore. Get him out of here, Vance ordered. As the soldiers dragged a screaming Rylan Hale out into the rain toward the waiting Humvees, Marcus stood up and turned to the sheriff. Sheriff Briggs, Marcus said calmly, I suggest you call your lawyer. The Department of Justice will be conducting a full audit of your department's traffic stops and arrests for the last 10 years. If there is a pattern of profiling, and I suspect there is, you will be joining your deputy. Marcus picked up his battered laptop case. Colonel, Marcus said, I have a graduation to attend. My son Elias is becoming a paratrooper tomorrow. I'd hate to be late. Sir, Colonel Vance said, we secured your vehicle, but frankly, sir, the G-Wagon is compromised. We can't let you drive it until it's swept for bugs. We have a transport ready for you. Very good, Marcus said. He walked out of the station, flanked by the colonel. The rain had stopped, leaving the air fresh. The soldiers saluted as he passed. Sheriff Briggs slid down the wall, sitting on the floor, listening to the sound of his career ending as the convoy roared away. The morning sun over Fort Benning was starkly different from the humid haze of the previous day's roadside stop. It was crisp, golden, and illuminated the manicured parade grounds where 500 soldiers stood in perfect formation. Lieutenant General Marcus Hale sat in the VIP box, his dress blues immaculate, his chest adorned with a rack of ribbons that told the story of 30 years of service. To his right sat the base commander, Major General Harrison. To his left, an empty chair where his wife would have sat had she not passed 3 years prior. Marcus watched the field through dark aviator sunglasses. He was not looking at the formation as a commander today. He was looking for one face. In the third row, standing rigid at the position of attention, was Private First Class Elias Hale. Elias did not know his father had spent the night in a secure safe house, debriefing federal agents. He did not know his father had been handcuffed and humiliated less than 24 hours ago. All Elias saw was the towering figure of his father on the podium, a silent pillar of strength. Impressive group, Marcus, General Harrison leaned over and whispered. Your boy looks sharp. He's a good soldier, Marcus replied quietly. Better than I was at that age. I heard about the incident, Harrison said, his voice dropping. The JAG Corps is having a field day. They're calling it Operation Clean Sweep. Apparently, they found more than just bad attitude in that sheriff's department. Marcus nodded, his jaw set. It wasn't an incident, Tom. It was a symptom, and we are the cure. As the ceremony concluded and the order dismissed rang out, the formation broke into a sea of berets and camouflage. Marcus walked down the steps, the crowd parting for him respectfully. He found Elias near the barracks. The young soldier snapped a salute, but Marcus pulled him into a bear hug. For a moment, the general was just a dad. Proud of you, son, Marcus said, his voice thick. Thanks, Dad, Elias smiled, unaware of the storm swirling around them. Did you drive the G-Wagon? The guys were dying to see it. Marcus paused. He thought of the silver SUV currently being stripped down by forensics experts at an FBI impound lot to ensure no tracking devices had been planted. Not today, son, Marcus lied smoothly. Had to take a government transport. Logistics issues. While Marcus celebrated, Deputy Rylan Hale was experiencing a very different kind of morning. He was not in the familiar, comfortable holding cell of Oak Haven where he used to taunt prisoners. He was in a federal detention center in Atlanta in solitary confinement. The cell was white, sterile and terrifyingly silent. He had been stripped of his uniform, his badge, and his name. He was now inmate 4920. The door buzzed and clicked open. Rylan jumped. He expected his lawyer. He expected Sheriff Briggs to come bail him out with a slap on the wrist. Instead, two men in dark suits walked in. One was black, one was white. Neither looked like they were in the mood for jokes. "I want my lawyer," Rylan croaked. His throat was dry. He had not been given water in hours. "You'll get your lawyer when we process you," the black agent said, pulling out a metal chair and sitting backward on it. "I'm Special Agent King, FBI Civil Rights Division. This is Agent Perry." "Civil rights?" Rylan scoffed, trying to summon a shred of his old bravado. "I made a traffic stop. Maybe I got a little rough. That's a procedural error, not a federal case." Agent King smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. He tossed a file onto the small metal table. It landed with a heavy thud. "See, that's where you're wrong, Rylan. We pulled the dash cam footage, not just from that day, but from the last 6 months. We recovered the deleted files from the server Sheriff Briggs tried to wipe this morning." Rylan felt a cold spike of adrenaline in his gut. "I don't know what you're talking about." "We saw the stop with the college student from Florida last month," Agent Perry said, leaning against the wall. "The one where you found a baggie of meth in his back seat after you leaned in. We have video of that baggie in your palm before you reached into the car." Rylan went pale. "That's planting evidence." "Planting evidence?" King said softly. "That's a felony. But yesterday you kidnapped a 3-star general. Do you know what the penalty is for kidnapping a high-ranking government official during a time of elevated national alert?" Rylan shook his head mutely. "It falls under the Patriot Act," King said, dropping the bombshell. "You aren't looking at unemployment, Rylan. You're looking at 20 years to life in a federal supermax. You're going to be in a cage with the very people you framed." Rylan began to hyperventilate. The reality of the karma was hitting him like a freight train. The badge was gone. The protection was gone. He was just a man who had bullied the wrong person. I was just following orders," Rylan whispered. "The oldest excuse in the book." "Sheriff Briggs," King said. "He told us to boost revenue. He said target the out-of-towners. He said—" "Ah," King interrupted. "Now we're getting somewhere. You want to talk about Briggs? Because right now Briggs is in the next room and he's talking about you." The downfall of the Oak Haven Sheriff's Department was not a slow leak. It was a damn collapse. By Monday morning, the story had broken. But it was not just a local news story. Because General Hale had made that call to the Pentagon, the military's involvement made it national headline news. CNN, Fox, and MSNBC were all running the same B-roll footage. The Oak Haven Sheriff Station surrounded by military Humvees and the shocking image of a handcuffed Deputy Rylan Hale being led away by Army Rangers. The headline was simple and devastating. "Small Town Tyranny. Sheriff's Department dismantled after arresting Army General in Oak Haven." The atmosphere was chaotic. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, shamed into action by the federal intervention, had raided the courthouse. They were seizing everything: ticket books, evidence lockers, hard drives, even the sheriff's personal safe. Sheriff Vance Briggs sat in an interrogation room that looked identical to the one Rylan was in. But the person across from him was not an FBI agent. It was the District Attorney of Georgia, Elena Vance. She was a woman known for her political ambition and her utter lack of mercy for embarrassments. "Briggs," Vance said, adjusting her glasses, "you have run this county like a pirate ship for 12 years. We looked at the books. You have seized over $3 million in cash and cars under civil asset forfeiture in the last 4 years alone, and 90% of those seized were from minority drivers." "It's legal," Briggs sweated, wiping his forehead with a trembling hand. "State law allows seizure of assets suspected to be involved in crime." "Suspected," Vance corrected. "Not proven? You never charged half these people. You just took their cars and told them it would cost more to sue you than the car was worth." "That's not law enforcement, Briggs. That's highway robbery." She leaned forward. "But here's the twist. General Hale did not just sue you. He activated the JAG Corps. The United States military is filing a formal inquiry into the disruption of national logistics. They are classifying your department as a corrupt organization that allows us to use RICO statutes." Briggs gasped. "RICO was used for the mafia. It meant they could take everything: his pension, his house, his boat, his wife's car." "I want a deal," Briggs pleaded. "I'll give you Rylan. He was a loose cannon. He did the planting. I just signed the paperwork." "Rylan already gave us you," Vance said coldly. "He told us about the quota system." He told us about the bonus you gave deputies for seizing luxury cars. He told us about the safe in your basement. Briggs slumped in his chair. He was done. The kingdom of Oak Haven had fallen. Meanwhile, in a high-rise conference room in Atlanta, General Marcus Hale sat at the head of a long mahogany table. He was not in uniform. He was in a sharp gray suit. Flanking him were 3 military lawyers and a private civil rights attorney named Derek Vaughn. Across the table sat the legal team for Oak Haven County, looking like deer in headlights. "Gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice calm but filling the room, "my lawyers tell me you are offering a settlement, $2 million and a public apology." The county lawyer nodded vigorously. "Yes, General. The county is prepared to pay immediately to avoid further litigation. We are deeply sorry for the actions of Deputy Hale." Marcus picked up a glass of water, took a sip, and set it down. "You think this is about money?" Marcus asked. "I don't need your money. I have a pension, and I have my integrity, neither of which your client seems to possess." "General, it's a very generous offer," the lawyer stammered. "It's hush money," Marcus said. "You want me to sign a non-disclosure agreement? You want this to go away so you can hire a new sheriff and go back to business as usual." Marcus stood up. He walked to the window, looking out over the city. "Here is my counter-offer," Marcus said, turning back to them. "I will not sue for a single penny for myself. However, I am filing a class action lawsuit on behalf of every person Deputy Hale and Sheriff Briggs have illegally stopped in the last 10 years. My team has already identified 400 victims." The county lawyers dropped their pens. 400 plaintiffs. It would bankrupt the county. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, "I want a federal consent decree. I want the Oak Haven Sheriff's Department dissolved and policing duties turned over to the state police until a federally appointed oversight board, which I will help select, can rebuild the department from the ground up." "General, you can't demand that," the lawyer protested. That's a takeover." "I am a general in the United States Army," Marcus said, his eyes hard as flint. "I specialize in nation building and dismantling hostile regimes. You harbored a hostile regime on American soil. Those are my terms. You have 1 hour." Marcus walked out of the room, leaving the lawyers in stunned silence. Outside in the hallway, his son Elias was waiting. He had been briefed on the extent of the situation. "You really aren't taking the money, Dad?" Elias asked. "You could retire on that." "Elias," Marcus put a hand on his son's shoulder, "there are things more expensive than money. Freedom is one, dignity is another. If I took that money, I'd be selling the dignity of every person that man bullied on the side of the road. I couldn't look you in the eye if I did that." Elias smiled. "You're a hard man to beat, Dad." "I didn't beat them, son," Marcus said, checking his watch. "The truth beat them. I just made the phone call." Back in the cell, Deputy Rylan Hale sat on his bunk. The reality of his future was settling in. He would lose his house. His wife had already stopped answering his calls. He was facing federal prison time. And the worst part, he knew deep down that he deserved it. He had spent years thinking he was the wolf preying on the sheep. He never stopped to think that one day he might try to bite a lion. 6 months later, the federal courthouse in Atlanta was surrounded by a sea of media vans. The trial of United States versus Rylan Hale and United States versus Vance Briggs had become a lightning rod for national discourse on police accountability. What had started as a traffic stop on a dusty Georgia road had snowballed into one of the most significant civil rights cases in the decade. Inside courtroom 4B, the air was stiflingly tense. Lieutenant General Marcus Hale sat in the front row, his posture as rigid as granite. He wore a dark charcoal suit, his military uniform retired for the day, though his presence commanded no less respect. Beside him sat his son, Elias, now a private first class with the 82nd Airborne, on leave specifically for this moment. In the defendant's chair sat Rylan Hale. The swagger was gone. The chewing tobacco was gone. He had lost 30 pounds in pre-trial detention. His cheap suit hung loosely on his frame, and he refused to look at the gallery. He looked small. Sheriff Vance Briggs sat at the adjacent table. He looked even worse, a man whose entire identity had been stripped away, leaving a terrified elderly shell. The presiding judge, the Honorable Robert Sterling, a man known for his severe sentences in corruption cases, shuffled the papers on his bench. The silence in the room was absolute. "Mr. Hale," Judge Sterling said, his voice echoing off the mahogany walls, "you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers on 3 counts of deprivation of rights under color of law, 1 count of kidnapping, and 1 count of violation of the Espionage Act for the unauthorized tampering with classified military equipment." Rylan began to weep. It was a pathetic gasping sound. "You took an oath," the judge continued, his voice rising. "You were given a gun and a badge to protect the citizens of this county. Instead, you used them as tools of predation. You targeted General Hale not because he committed a crime, but because he defied your narrow, prejudiced expectation of who belongs in a luxury car. You saw a black man with power and you tried to break him." The judge leaned forward. "But you did not break him, Mr. Hale. You broke yourself. And in doing so, you exposed a rot that has festered in Oak Haven for too long." "Your Honor, please," Rylan sobbed. "I have a family." "You were just a bully," Judge Sterling cut him off. "And bullies do not belong in society. They belong in cages." The gavel raised. "Rylan Hale, I sentence you to 22 years in federal prison to be served at USP Leavenworth. You are not eligible for parole." The courtroom erupted in a low murmur. 22 years. It was a life sentence for a man of 32. Rylan's knees buckled and the U.S. Marshals had to hold him up. The judge turned to Briggs. "And you, Mr. Briggs, you created the culture that allowed a man like Hale to thrive. You chose revenue over rights. I sentence you to 10 years. Furthermore, under the RICO statutes, the court orders the immediate forfeiture of all personal assets acquired during your tenure as sheriff to pay restitution to the victims of your illegal seizures." Briggs put his head on the table and closed his eyes. He was bankrupt. He was going to prison. It was over. The impact of the Hale verdict rippled far beyond the courtroom. As part of the settlement Marcus had engineered, the Oak Haven Sheriff's Department was officially dissolved 3 weeks after the trial. Jurisdiction was handed over to the Georgia State Patrol until a new, nonpartisan county police force could be established. The Hale Decree, as legal scholars called it, set a precedent where federal oversight boards could audit small-town police budgets to look for predatory ticketing practices. But the most visible change was in Oak Haven itself. The speed trap at Miller's Creek Bridge was gone. The predatory signage was removed. The fear that had gripped the minority communities in the county began to lift. The money from the class action lawsuit, millions of dollars seized from Briggs's corrupt coffers, went back to the people. Mechanics got their tools back. Families got their cars back. Students who had lost financial aid due to bogus drug charges had their records expunged and their tuition paid. Marcus did not take a dime. He donated his portion of the settlement to the Oak Haven Legal Defense Fund, a nonprofit set up to provide free legal counsel to those who could not afford it. The final drive. 1 year to the day after the arrest, a silver Mercedes G-Wagon rolled down Route 27. The car was pristine. The lock on the back had been replaced. The scratches buffed out. The interior smelled of leather and pine. Marcus was driving. He was retired now. He had hung up his uniform 2 months prior, ending a 35-year career with a ceremony at the Pentagon that brought the Secretary of Defense to tears. He was a civilian now, just Marcus. In the passenger seat sat Elias. He was wearing his dress blues, a new medal pinned to his chest, an Army Commendation Medal for saving a squad mate during a training accident. "You okay, Dad?" Elias asked as they approached the Miller's Creek Bridge. Marcus slowed the car. He looked at the spot on the shoulder where it had all happened. The gravel was still there. The oak tree was still there. But the predator was gone. "I'm fine, son," Marcus said, a small, peaceful smile touching his lips. He pulled the car over just for a moment. He rolled down the window. The heat was there, the humidity, the sound of cicadas. "Why are we stopping?" Elias asked. "Just checking the perimeter," Marcus said. He looked at the empty spot where Rylan's cruiser used to hide. Marcus reached into the center console and pulled out his phone. He looked at the background picture. It was a new one, him and Elias, fishing at the lake, laughing. He thought about the anger he had felt that day, the rage. It was gone now. It had been replaced by the quiet satisfaction of justice served. He had used his power not to destroy but to correct. He had fought a war on a roadside in Georgia, and he had won without firing a shot. "You know," Marcus said, putting the car back in gear, "Deputy Hale asked me a question that day." "What did he ask?" "He asked me whose car this was." Marcus chuckled, the sound deep and resonant. He pressed the accelerator. The G-Wagon roared to life, the twin-turbo engines singing a song of freedom. "And I told him," Marcus said, "it's mine." They drove off into the sunset, leaving the shadows of Oak Haven behind them, driving toward a future that was a little bit brighter and a hell of a lot fairer. And that is the incredible, true-to-life story of how one arrogant deputy messed with the wrong man and brought down an entire corrupt system. It is a powerful reminder that while authority can be abused, true power lies in integrity, intelligence, and the courage to stand your ground. Deputy Rylan Hale thought the badge made him a king, but General Marcus Hale showed him that the law is the only true sovereign. Karma did not just hit Hale, it steamrolled him with the full weight of the United States justice system. If this story got your blood boiling, or if you cheered when Marcus revealed that recording, hit that like button right now. It helps us get these stories out to more people. What do you think about Marcus's final move? Was naming the legal center after the corrupt cops the ultimate revenge, or should he have kept the millions for himself? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want more stories of hard karma and justice served cold, make sure you subscribe and ring the notification bell. You do not want to miss what we have coming next. Stay safe, know your rights, and I will see you in the next one.